guns, drugs, violence, and crime. These are the trademarks of motorcycle clubs.
New tonight, the leader of the Rhode Island Hells Angels is in trouble with the law. Yet again, 28-year-old Joseph Lancia is facing new charges after an altercation at the Cadillac Lounge in Providence last night.
From July that left a man injured, the shooting happened in Fair Oaks on Tuesday. The suspects were served with search warrants.
A bikie boss is in custody tonight with police hailing his arrest, one of the biggest in Victoria in recent years. Mick Murray is charged with murdering a Tony Mockbell associate in Dandenong in 2019.
While some consider the Hells Angels as the most brutal syndicate in the underworld, others believe their brutality is no match for the Mafias.
It's taken 3 decades of dedicated police work, but tonight Italy's most wanted Mafia boss is behind bars. The head of the Cosa Nostra has allegedly been found guilty of multiple murders. His youngest victim, just 12 years old.
The Hells Angels and the Mafia are two powerful groups that have undoubtedly caught many people's attention. Both groups operate a complicated structure and have a string of strange rules members are to live by.
In the Russian Mafia, there is no structure like the Hells Angels. The individual with the most money calls the shots. In a situation where a leader dies, members can stage coups, spy, betray, or sabotage members of your gang to gain control. The major players in the Russian Mafia world are the 3 Chechen gangs, the Slav groups, and the 21st Century Association. They all juggle for one thing: power. And one way to earn that is by pulling each other down.
Police in Russia say one of the main figures in the country's organized crime community has been gunned down in Moscow.
But in America, organized crimes work in another direction.
The Russian Mafia's roots can be traced back to the old Soviet prison system. This explains why they are more violent, more aggressive, and don't play by any rules.
Unlike the Russian Mafia, groups in America run like a family and have a strict structure. In the Hells Angels, there is a structure, and the roles of members within the organization are well defined.
There's charters, and within the charter, the chapter, the group, there's a president, a vice president, a warlord, which is in charge of weapons and retaliations and defense.
There are rules every member of the club lives by.
I was told, when you meet a Hells Angel and you got your sunglasses on, you better lift your sunglasses up and look that person in the eye. That member wants to see your eyes. I was told if I had riding gloves on, you better take your riding glove off when you shake hands with a Hells Angel. Never touch a Hells Angel's patch. Never slap them on the back.
Just like the Hells Angels, American and Italian mafias have a structure with a boss, an underboss, a consigliere, capos, and soldiers.
They are broken down into crews headed by a capo. Each crew has its own territory that they control and are responsible for bringing in the money. It is pyramidal in structure, and so the money flows up to the boss. Money is made in a variety of ways, mostly through illegal gambling, but also burglaries, truck hijacking, and drugs.
And now to a big Mafia takedown today. The FBI, NYPD, and other agencies zeroed in on reputed members and associates of the Colombo crime family. More than a dozen arrests made here, including the man prosecutors say is the Colombo crime boss.
To avoid being caught by the authorities, mafias often operate legitimate businesses such as casinos, restaurants, and construction companies. Both the Hells Angels and the Mafia also share a striking ideology when taking in recruits. To become a Hells Angels member, all members of your charter need to accept you into the family.
To get full membership, you have to be voted on by the members of your charter, and you have to receive a 100% vote. If one member of that charter votes against you, your prospecting phase continues.
Becoming a Hells Angels member is a long process that could take years. The last person they want on the group is a snitch, and the best way to sniff them out is to vet them thoroughly.
Of your prospecting, from when it starts, there's a minimum mandatory of 365 days. And that's to some extent how they insulate themselves, because they know that a cop can't keep pace with them and can't keep up with them for that long of time.
The Cosa Nostra Mafia employs a similar technique when recruiting mobsters. After the names are passed around the 5 families, recruits are made to wait for years before they are accepted into the group.
Even though the Mafia and the Hells Angels have several things in common, they still have their differences. In the Hells Angels, your charter is considered your second family. But in the Mafia is considered your first family, meaning if you have a dying mother or an important family issue to attend to, you are expected to drop it and serve the Mafia first.
The Hells Angels was not structured to be a criminal group in its inception, which explains why they hold family dear to heart. In the Mafia, you are expected to serve the Mafia before anything.
Both the Mafia and the Hells Angels are known to control the underworld, but they both don't wield all the power. In terms of numbers and manpower, the Hells Angels surpass the Mafia. The motorcycle club has an estimated 6,000 members. But that's not the most impressive thing. Due to their organization and structure, they have 467 chapters in over 69 countries.
Breaking this noon, the FBI has carried out raids at Hells Angels clubhouses in Massachusetts.
Back home, heavily armed police have raided the Hells Angels Alphington clubhouse.
We start with breaking news out of East Spokane. Federal agents and Spokane police raided the Hells Angels clubhouse this morning.
In other words, the Angels are spread over the country, and their influence is worldwide. On the other hand, the FBI estimates that there are at most 3,000 members and affiliates of Italian-American organized crime groups in the U.S. And these days, Mafias no longer possess the robust national presence and influence that they once had.
While the Hells Angels are spread across the world, the Mafia are popular and feared in their strongholds like Las Vegas, New York. In a case of a clash between the two, the Angels have contacts everywhere.
However, in terms of political influence, Mafias beat the Hells Angels. The Hells Angels are no match for the Mafia. They bribe judges, senators, congressmen, and have several high-ranking government officials on their payroll. But that's not all. Mafia can influence election results in their stronghold and even run for political posts. Another power the Mafia wields is economic power. The Mafia are at the forefront of several businesses like the casino industry, the garment industry, most of the unions, and even construction. Some massive constructions like sports and stadiums were built by the Mafia.
In the past, they have controlled massive industries, labor unions, trucking routes, and even revenues that were meant to go into the government's pockets.
The reason is simple. War is bad for business, and both groups try to stay under the radar. Only 2 things can make both groups go at each other: business and territory.
Territory is very important to the biker gangs. The territory you control influences how much money you can make within that territory.
But what happens when both parties have to fight over the same territory? The result is a drug war that would claim several lives, like we saw in Canada. For decades, the Hells Angels have dominated the streets of Canada. Through fear and intimidation, they exploit any business. If any gang wants to sell drugs on the streets of Canada, they would need to pay a 10% tax to the Angels. This mandatory tax enables them to conduct their business without the Angels' wrath. But when a younger group with an alleged connection to the Rizzuto crime family entered the game, they would go head-on with the Angels rather than pay.
The Blood Family Mafia, police say, is led by Dave Turmel, a 27-year-old from the Quebec City region, right now on the run. He's believed to be in Europe. But on the streets of Quebec, police are targeting the BFM. The reason? The gang's war with the Hells Angels is boiling over.
The Blood Family Mafia, a group suspected to be affiliated to the Rizzuto crime family, entered the Canadian drug business, but didn't want to pay the 10% tribute to the Hells Angels. This will lead to a bloody gang war that would lives.
When the Hells Angels first arrived in Canada in 1977, they had just one goal: to dominate the streets of Canada. They eliminated any competitor that was not willing to do business with them till they had none left. In 1994, the Rock Machine Motorcycle Club teamed up with other independent clubs to wage war against the Angels. The war lasted 8 years and became the deadliest biker war in history, with over 162 lives lost. At the end of the war, the Hells Angels came out and immediately monopolized the Quebec drug scene. They controlled the supply and distribution of drugs in Quebec and across Canada. Any other group that wants to enter the drug scene would have to pay a 10% tax on all their profits. Since the Quebec War, all gangs paid the mandatory 10%, and those who refused were dealt with. But in 2023, the Blood Family Mafia became the first group since the Rock Machine to openly defy the Angels.
The Blood Family Mafia is led by Dave Turmel, a 28-year-old who has been in and out of prison. Over the years, Turmel had built a successful drug empire and was one of the largest distributors in Quebec City.
Turmel took a bold step in 2023 when he decided that he should keep 100% of the profit he makes and get his supply, even though he was operating in a Hell Angels territory. In January 2023, Turmel found a GPS tracker under his car and concluded it was the work of the Hells Angels. His response was to flee to Europe and plan his revenge.
The suspects that we're looking for that are not in Quebec, we're working with different authorities. I'm not going to go into too much detail.
On March 7th, the home of Mathieu Pelletier, a Hells Angels member, was decorated with bullets, and several Hells Angels businesses would feel the heat in the coming months. Things got serious when Michel Dune-Guerin, a Hells Angels associate, was found dead in November 2023. To avoid a war, the Hells Angels sent an influential member to negotiate a truce. They would allow Turmel sell his drugs if he would stop the attacks. But the Blood Family Mafia leader rejected the offer and advised the Angels associate to take the next flight back to Quebec.
The BFM is reportedly connected with Mexican cartels, which explains why their violent tactics are borrowed from. It's similar to how drug cartels in Central America.
On February 19th, 2024, a video of Terrell's men torturing Hells Angels members was sent to a Montreal newspaper. But that was the beginning. That same day, 3 Hells Angels were kidnapped and taken to an isolated farm.
There were 2 very violent incidents. One was at this home south of Quebec City. 3 men with links to the Hells Angels were kidnapped and tortured.
When one of the kidnappers slept off, the kidnapped Hells Angels members escaped and called the police.
One of the men escaped, killed the captor who was watching him, and went to a nearby home to call police.
3 days after the escape, the Blood Family Mafia declared to the Angels that they were not done yet.
Another incident was also the kidnapping of a man with links to the Hells. He was dropped off on the streets of Montreal after being tortured and mutilated.
The kidnapped Hells Angels member was tortured and was missing both a toe and a finger.
These kidnappings and torture pushed the Hells Angels to the back of the wall. According to reports, the Hells Angels reached out to the police and warned them to act or prepare for a biker war. This yielded a result no one expected.
A sweeping police crackdown on organized crime in Quebec has led to more than 30 arrests in the last week, and more are expected. Authorities say it's a blow to the Blood Family Mafia, a street gang believed to be behind a string of violent kidnappings.
On March 1st, 2024, Quebec police launched an operation codenamed Projet Scandaleux. Although the operation looked like a normal one, the sting operation targeted the Blood Family Mafia.
Well, Donna, these are charge sheets for some of the people arrested over the last week in this region. Almost all of them members of the same street gang.
In just a week and a half, 35 members and associates of the Blood Family Mafia were arrested to answer for their crimes.
During the operation, Rubens Dennis, Turmel's right-hand man, was arrested in Portugal after being on the run.
This seems to be the ultimate demise and end of the Quebec City drug war. But Turmel is still at large, and the story may not be over yet.